So there's going to be a bit of me in this film, but mainly Crash's head.
Don't worry, I think people prefer that anyway. It's another season over, yeah?
Yep, a wrap for 2023.
Yeah, bit of a mixed bag, wasn't it? But we're going to cover highs and lows, aren't we?
So what were your highs?
I think I peaked physically at that Ellerton try. I came third overall. That was probably the physical highlight of my year. No, I think I enjoyed training for the Outlaw. I think I got really fit. I was really happy with what I managed to achieve in those 6-7 weeks before that. So I think that's probably the highlight of my year. How about you? What's the highlight for you?
I've had a few actually. I think the biggest highlight was coming out of the swim at Almere in third overall. That was pretty cool. And then actually getting to the front of the race, that was a real highlight. And standing on the podium, so that was probably my highlight of the year.
I think Almere was good. I think that was a high for everyone, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, and we had a great trip in Portugal, and I had a really good race. So
yeah,
that was another good one. I also quite enjoyed a few of your fashion choices. They cheered me up no end. I think your beige on beige. And your long socks, flip-flops was, yeah.
Were they a high or a low? Because you had to stand next to me.
I mean, at the time they were probably a low, but...
Any lows?
Lows for me was walking the marathon at Almere and Samarin. Crash, can you sit down?
Crash, can you sit down?
Do it at your own pace, of course. Yeah, Samarin was probably a low for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I conned myself into thinking I was fit and I wasn't fit. So that was a low. But let's move on quickly from the lows. What was your lows?
I think getting injured at the Outlaw. I think I trained really well. I felt really fit, and I just had no luck that day at all, did I? So I think, and I think coming out of it with an injury that then pretty much curtailed the rest of the year. That was pretty low, but helped you get ready for Almere, didn't I? And it meant that I was good support crew for that. So I think,
and you at least got to end at Cascais, and you
I got a good race at the end of Cascais, and I really enjoyed getting there. So for that one, so that was really good. Moving
on from that, we're going to talk about all the off-season stuff.
Yeah, we're going to talk about what you have to do at the end of the year when the season's over. You've got to do an off-season, don't you? So.
Yeah, got to eat as many burgers as you can.
No, I think we thought it would be interesting to talk about because I think it's something that people do really differently. But I do think that there are some similar things that kind of run through everyone.
So Tom is going to do the general coachy points.
Yes. We're going to talk about how that kind of relates.
And then I'm going to waffle about more interesting stuff. So go on then.
Yeah. So I think the first bit of your off-season is the actual, what I would actually call the off-season bit. And I think this is what most people think of when they hit their last race and they get off, lots of burgers sitting down on your ass and not doing anything. What that really is actually is a period where you really focus on physical and mental recovery, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that period will generally last anywhere between sort of 1 and 4 weeks. And I think that in our experience, that duration that you need that to last is really personal and dependent on largely how long your season's been and how many races you've done. And I think a little bit as well, how hard you've gone into that, specifically that last one that you did. Because last year you needed a really long off-season period, didn't you? Because
I was absolutely ruined.
You'd done Kona 70.3 World Championships, trained really, really hard leading into both, and come out with a bit of sickness as well.
I was really ill. So
that one was much longer than we've done this year. But you needed that, didn't you, to sort of physically recover from that effort.
And mentally,
recover from...
didn't want to see my run shoes ever again.
I think there's basically 2 camps people fall into, isn't there? So I think people either take an off-season where they don't touch the bike, don't touch the run shoes, don't go anywhere near a swimming pool. Or I think what we tend to prefer doing is where you just take out all of the structure out of the training, make everything a lot less intense and a lot more fun.
Yeah.
I think like you focus on the bits of, we really love doing swim, bike, run, don't we? I think personally, I mean, me definitely, I enjoy the training more than the race.
That's all you did this year.
Yeah.
We do a lot more social stuff, a lot more Zwift, a lot more like trying to make things a bit more fun and a lot less structured. I don't like stopping completely. I've done years and had coaches where we did set amounts where you don't do training. I actually found that really quite stressful physically and mentally. I often got ill, and the discipline to try and get back was like really hard. I ended up with loads of false starts, and it ultimately made me a bit miserable, to be honest. Whereas I much prefer now like just a moderate approach to everything. So I don't go crazy on the food, but I do enjoy some stuff that I like. I don't train, but I don't do like, you know, strict things where you're hurting.
Not loads and loads of threshold repeats.
No. Or hour tempo intervals. I think that was a low this year. But yeah, like more fun stuff, you know, wake up, see what I feel like doing, but I am going to move in some way that day. And that really helps me. It helps me deal with work. It helps me deal with everything. And I think ultimately for us, we're amateurs. This is fun. Like, it's what I want to do with my day. So Coach Thomas being replaced
by the much better coach in the team. Come on, off you get. Boom.
That'll serve you right for needing a toilet break.
Yeah. So I think after you've done the off season, is the bit where it gets a bit different, and I think some people maybe get it a little bit wrong, or there's other bits that you can do.
And that's kind of where we are now.
And I think this is the bit that I think is actually a really important part of the year that I think for a lot of people gets missed or overlooked.
Yeah, Tom's top tips on what he has called the...
So I like to split it into different bits. So I would call that first recovery bit your actual off season. I think after that you move into a bit that I would call post-season. Can you sit down? Could you lie down? Could you lie down? Lie down?
Don't do it quickly, Crash.
No,
it's fine.
We're not on the clock or anything. Good boy. So I think once you've done that initial recovery period, I think you'd move into what I would call the post-season training bit. So I think this is where you start to add a little bit more structure back into your training. And I think this is a period of the year where you can focus on some of the fundamental things that I think make you better as an athlete. So talking things like, you know, your technique in swim and on the run.
Anything that you kind of figured out that you don't have.
I think is another thing, whether that's in the gym or like, you know, run, swim, cycle specific strength, like with big paddles, big gears, hills, stuff like that. I think things that you wouldn't necessarily do in the season, but you've got a chance to do now and work on and actually make yourself better heading into the next year. So I think that's when you kind of start focusing on stuff like that.
I think it's also the bit where I start to I like looking at races. I like getting excited, definitely. Start dreaming again, start trying to think of what things, you know, excite you.
Yeah. I think that's an important part as well, because I think you're trying to add that little bit of structure and that little bit of discipline. I think looking at what races you might like to do or what would be fun to try and target next year or what your goals are, starting to think about those is really, really good thing to do. And
for me, it's about not doing anything too extreme. I like not jumping. Like I said, I don't go too far down in the off season, but I don't jump up too high in this bit.
Yeah.
So I like to keep things quite social, fun. Coffee stops after a swim.
I think you can also keep a bit of that. I think even though we're adding in a bit of structure, I think the overall volume is still lower, isn't it? And I think you can still keep in some of those fun elements where you're doing more with friends, doing more socially, doing more. It's like I said, a lot of the training is maybe stuff that you wouldn't necessarily do in the midst of the season, in between races. So I think a lot of it is you can keep some of that stuff in as well and keep it more fun.
And it's also where, like, to be honest, like, the rest of life fits in more. Like, I end up doing a lot more work.
We've been doing a lot of house renovations.
Yeah, house renovations, seeing family, things like that. Like, it's where we try and fit some of that stuff in.
Yeah, I think that's a good point as well.
Yeah.
So then I think basically the bit from the end of your off season to when you want to start training for your first event, so that first block of training you can do for that first event you have next year, however long that is, I think that sort of period of time you kind of want to split in half between that postseason that we just talked about and what I would call the pre-season. So I think in the pre-season what you're trying to do is you've probably set your goals about exactly what races you want to race next year, what distance they are, where they are, what the specific demands of that course or
at least
the
first event.
Yes, certainly the first one. I think
that's all I ever like. What's next?
So I think you can start thinking about what training you need to do to be specifically ready for that challenge. And incorporating some of that stuff in. I wouldn't necessarily immediately change the total volume or intensity that you're doing, but what I would do is over the course of that pre-season block is slowly increase the volume that you're doing so that it matches what you want to be carrying in terms of your training load when you're training for that first event. So, and you want to carry into your season. So if you were, say, doing 10 hours over winter and you wanted to be training 20 hours for in your season, in between your races, to be prepared for your races, you want to slowly increase that over the course of your pre-season. And I'd largely do that by increasing the sort of amount of aerobic zone 2 work you do.
We don't follow that normal, that old pattern of kind of big base season, big miles and stuff. Some coaches do still, some really almost go opposite.
Yeah, so I think that, like, so for me, the reason that we do it the way that we do it is I think if you just do an off season, then you do a massive aerobic build, like a massive aerobic base season over winter, you miss the opportunity to work on any of those technical fundamental elements that we talked about.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of time. Like
you're really aerobically fit in January, but there's no races to be aerobically fit for. I think if you put that aerobic build more closer to the events that you want to do, you're actually better prepared to go and race them.
One of the things is kind of more me being an athlete or whatever is I don't have to worry too much about it. I just try and keep building on the week on week and just work in the moment. I don't try and look too far ahead. And then as you kind of get into the pre-season bit you're talking about, like I like to put in like park runs or like Zwift races or any time trials, stuff like that, like anything I can kind of find, because it starts getting you excited again, because I get a bit low you have like that off season and you're excited to eat the burgers and you're excited not to do horrible long rides anymore, but actually after that comes kind of a low of, oh, that was really cool, like I felt really proud, I'd done something amazing, and then there kind of comes this months before.
Well, I think that's because it is a really, really long time, so I think that's a really important thing to kind of think as well, like it's a really, really long time that you've got to go and you've got before your next big race is going to be. So I think taking that week to week approach is really good, and I think that putting in those process goals, whether that, and those can be events, they can be things that you work towards things.
Yeah, sometimes I just set or try and PB 100 metres in a pool.
Yeah, stuff like that. But I think it's a really good time of year as well for, I think, some process goals that you're going to work towards and you're going to try and hit, so that you know that you've definitely improved over winter and that you can carry that forwards into the season.
So that's pretty much how we do it. So we're kind of in that post-season bit. So the things I'm working on over this is I'm working on a bit of weight loss, which is quite tricky to do in triathlon with all the training. But
I think it's especially hard as well in the season. I think you might lose some naturally, but you've got to fuel those big sessions, those big tempo rides, those hard long days, you've got to be fueling them, and I think you might lose some weight just by happenstance, but I think actually attempting to put your body into a big deficit is not a good idea in the race season. So
I've done it before, it's a really bad idea. So that's my goal for this winter. So I will make a little mini series about that, and you're running. Yeah.
So I've got to find a way to train to get faster at running without getting injured. So I think that we are going to be doing some vlogs like we've been doing over the course of this year, around our off-season and post-season training and that sort of stuff. So yours is going to be focused around what you're doing with your weight, and mine is going to be focused around what I'm doing with my running. So if you're interested, tune into that and just see if we make any progress.
or if we're sat here in 4 months exactly the same as before. I'm looking at events for next year. So if anyone has any ideas of kind of what events you want us to do next year, like drop us a comment. Current ones which I'm looking at a little bit are Ironman New Zealand and Ironman Wales were the two I was looking at. I didn't take my slot for Taupo. We decided not to, but if you really want to see Taupo, we can go and try and qualify again just for the 70.3 Worlds.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to know what people would like to see us race. I definitely want to race some full distance stuff again next year. Mostly because I really enjoyed the training for the Outlaw. I think that was the bit of the year where I was happiest and where I was enjoying my training and everything we had going on most. So I think that's what I want to do going next year. But if there is anything that is of particular interest, then just let us know in the comments below.
So if you have been enjoying our videos, if you could hit the subscribe, that would be great.
Yeah, it does really actually genuinely help us out. So if you want to see more of what we've got going on or you want to hear more from us, then definitely do subscribe, like the video, and if there's anything we can help with, write a comment down below. And
also your suggestions for next year, because I like looking up races.
Yes. Even if we don't go, it'll be fun to look them up and things and live the dream for a minute or two.
Okay, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.